This Oversight Commission meeting for Monday, October 26, 2020. Thanks for everyone joining us today. And can you please, Justin, do roll call?
Diane, can you do that?
Ken. Sade Callwood. Oops. I'll go back to her. Kelly Ellsworth Etchison. Sade, I see you. Did you respond? I think you're muted. Okay, thank you. Noel Garcia Jr.
Present.
Chuck Grigsby.
Present.
Cedric Haro. Helen Josephson.
Present.
Sharon Reed Davis.
It's Sharon, and I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you're phoning in, Sharon? Or just have your video off?
Yeah, I just have my video off.
Okay, thanks. Chris Root,
Present.
Quentin Tyler,
Present.
Eric Williams,
Hello.
Tanya Williams,
Present.
and going back, Kelly Ellsworth Etchison. And Cedric Haro.
Kelly just texted me and said that she was finishing up a meeting and that she's going to be connecting in just a minute.
Okay. That's everyone.
Thank you, Diane. We have quorum. We'll just move on to item 1.2 of the agenda, approval of the agenda of 10/26/2020. I'm assuming everyone's had a chance to review that. And if everyone has in fact done that, I would look for a motion to approve agenda for 10/26/2020.
Motion to approve here.
Motion done by Vice Chair Williams. Is there a second?
Support.
Supported by Commissioner Garcia. All those in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? All right, so we'll move to item 1.3 again as well with the approval of the minutes of 10/12/2020. Assuming that everyone has had a chance, are there any questions or concerns about the minutes for 10/12/2020? Yes, Commissioner Garcia.
I know it's on the record, and it's nothing major. But in my introduction, it says that I am currently an adjunct professor at Baker College, Owasso, Ferris State, and MSU. I am currently only at Ferris State, previously at Baker and MSU.
Duly noted. We'll get that amendment adjusted for you. Outside of that, is there any other questions or concerns about the minutes for 10/12/2020? All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. We'll move on to item 1.4.
Sorry to interrupt. Do we have a motion and a second for the minutes though?
Right, we need to do that.
Excuse me, did I miss that? Okay,
Yeah.
so do we have a motion to approve? Yes, Commissioner Root.
I'll second the motion to approve the minutes.
Okay,
I'll first.
I'll move that we approve the minutes.
And I'll
Thank
second.
you. Thank you. Thank you for keeping me on track, commissioners. Yes, so we have the motion by Commissioner Root and seconded by
Excuse
Garcia to
me.
approve the minutes for 10/12/2020. Thank you.
Excuse me. Yeah.
Yes, Sharon.
Yes, I was at the last meeting. I didn't have my video on. I wasn't there for the roll call, but I did join later. So I wanted to make note of that.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We were looking for you, and I'm glad that you're here with us this evening to help us collaborate and get this work done. So I appreciate you participating. Going back to the minutes, all those in favor of the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So passed. All right. We'll move to item 1.4, written communication I didn't see anything outside of what we have on there. Is there any written communication that may have came in recently, Diane? That
I just double checked Outlook and we don't have any written communication.
okay, so we'll move to item 1.5, and we just will go back to, and I just kind of want to ask just real quickly, Justin, do we have quite a few people on the line already yet?
At this time, there is nobody in the queue for public comment.
Okay, okay. So I guess in item 1.5, I just want to know if, we wanted to adopt the rule pursuant to MCL 15263, subsection limiting public comment to 5 minutes as we did to the previous meeting. And if we do, I'll look for a motion to approve that. In fact, if we do have a call in this evening.
Motion.
Okay, so there is a motion, but I wanted to amend the motion that had been made last month or a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, I didn't see who moved that for that original motion. I didn't see who said that.
That was Helen.
Thank you, Helen. Yes, please go ahead, Commissioner Kelly Ellsworth Etchison.
So there's a motion, so I guess there has to be support, and then we can go into discussion and maybe a friendly amendment.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion for the limiting public comment? Seconded by Commissioner Williams. Yes, please go ahead, Commissioner Etchison.
I would like to make a friendly amendment to the motion to adjust the time to 3 minutes versus 5 minutes.
Second.
That's seconded by you, Commissioner Josephson. Okay.
That was me, Sharon.
Oh. Okay, thank you, Commissioner Reed. Seconded for that friendly amendment for adding and making the public comment limited to 3 minutes. Is there any more discussion on that motion? All those in favor of that motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? One opposed. That motion passes. I do want to make a note that we do have Commissioner, how do you pronounce your last name, sir? I apologize.
It's Haro.
Haro. He has joined us here on the call, so I just want to make note of that.
Apologies, I had some technical difficulties.
No worries, no worries. All right, moving along to item number 2 on the agenda, communication from the audience. Is there still no one on the line to call in tonight for public comments?
There are no callers in the queue.
All right. I guess we'll move on to new business, item 3.1, develop a work plan for designing an oversight commission and order of presentations. And I'm sure hopefully everyone's got a chance to look at that information. And I will initially just open it up to commissioners who want to comment on the new business item 3.1 to set the tone of our discussion.
I can start. If no one
Please,
else is
Commissioner
ready.
Ellsworth.
So I do have quite a few notes, so I won't go through all of my notes, but I did look at the information, did some research, and wanted to begin the structure is what I think you're calling for, setting up the structure for what that commission will look like, right? What their duties. And so who's going to be at the table, I think is what we need to determine. Public input obviously will be critical to this endeavor. And then I know we have Noel Garcia, but for police for East Lansing, are we going to have the union? I think that would be valuable to also have their voices as well at the table, and how we're going to set up transparency and accountability for the commission. And so some of those things, how that's going to be reported out and what the staffing will look like. or whatever staffing support, the volunteers, how we're gonna get that established for the commission. And so those are just a few of my things. I do have more, I have like a page and a half of notes. So I'll wait for others to weigh in on what their thoughts are.
Thank you, Commissioner Richardson. Anyone else want to weigh in?
Yeah, when it comes to having union members, I do believe that was something that was addressed in the letter from POAM regarding that there does need to be union members in the talks as well.
Now, the letter that you're referring to is down in item 6.1. Is that correct, Vice Chair Williams?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So I think I was assuming that we were going to get like kind of an update from the city manager in regards to kind of really, you know, what they are thinking and what we need to be thinking about when it comes to them. Do you have anything, Deputy Chief Gonzalez or Chief Johnson, in regards to their input? Since we just talked about that real briefly, I know we'll address it a little bit later on, but initially, did we have any contact or updated information in regards to having them involved at this point?
I have not received any information reference POAM's interest on that, on representation at the commission meetings and things like that. But I can double check for our next meeting.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Chuck?
Please go ahead, Commissioner Garcia.
So just to make sure I'm in the right place here, we are at item 1.5, and then that's the, no, I'm sorry. Where are we in the agenda right now? Because
We're at item 3.1.
3.1.
And we got kind of really off topic, so I understand.
The draft work plan is what I was looking at, and it looks like there is a schedule, proposed work schedule. And in that work schedule, it does indicate that union rep and attorney were going to join us on January 11th. Can I just ask who drafted that work schedule?
To my understanding, it was Mr. Lahanis. I got a copy from him beforehand, but that's who I thought who drafted the initial one.
Okay. So are we referencing that right now, or we're asking questions about that document?
Well, the document is the schedule that they have presented. This is my assumption based in that. Like, again, I expect to have some clarification questions with Mr. Lahanis tonight, but that is just kind of a guide in what they were able to pull together for us to kind of really have a workflow in getting data and information presented by the community and staff.
Okay.
And then we have the other piece, which is our actual work plan that we're talking about.
Okay.
In regards to setting up the Oversight Commissions, from what I understand.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, Commissioner Williams.
Yeah, I was under the impression that we would develop our own work schedule.
I was too, and this may be part of just kind of really when we first started, we wasn't quite sure of what our options were and how the resources were kind of going to be presented. And so I think we have say in the order of presentations, who comes in, who's talking to us. So this is something that we can definitely amend and adjust and work with and talk with staff to do what we feel is necessary when it comes to that, at least that schedule is concerned.
Mr. Lahanis was just from Commissioner Williams' request reference bringing some experts in to discuss certain topics. I think Mr. Lahanis was just trying to give an outline of some of the experts we're going to have be available on certain dates, trying to meet those requests from our last meeting. I think that's where that agenda came from initially.
Thank you.
As I had suggested some other people that I would like to speak to. So do I understand that this list on the work plan is not exhaustive then?
No.
We can invite other people, and
yep.
Those are people who have, if I understand correctly now, have been confirmed as willing to come on those dates?
That's correct. And they can move it around too, depending on your schedule also. But he was just trying to address some of the issues that came up and just give an outline, but it's up to your agenda. No problem with that at all.
Yeah, none of these people are locked in per
Right.
se. This is just a template to work from.
Yeah. I don't care if they're locked in. I just didn't want somebody to be locked out.
All right, so I assume that kind of clears up that little confusion about the work schedule. Let's jump back, if we will, back to the work plan and back to Commissioner Ellsworth Etchison's initial presentation of kind of some of her different things with her notes. I'll just say this, you know, when it comes to the work plan, I really think we need to have very specific structure in developing that. And I know that Commissioner Ellsworth Etchison talked about a couple of different things. But I kind of wanted to show you the commission kind of really a standard of kind of really setting this thing up. And hopefully this is going to be helpful for you to see in regards to working on some of the different things that Commissioner Ellsworth Etchison brought to light in her initial thoughts. Justin, if you mind, can you go to full screen to chapter 2, steps and decision points of the NACOLE document? Can everyone see that? Is that big enough for everyone? I can't really see everyone, so I'll have to hear your voices on most things. So there you go. That's beautiful. So the reason why I thought this may be pertinent to our conversation that we're having tonight in regards to walking away with action steps or setting up key things that we can do in between our meeting in having action steps when it comes to setting this thing up for this commission that we want to have going in play. And this really just basically walks us through how to do that, or at least gives us a guide. And as you see, number one is the goal setting. We need to really think about what is our goal for this oversight? You know, what do we want them to really be, for example, reviewing, monitoring, or advising when it comes to their role? And I think when we talk about setting up a work plan, I think the work plan has to coincide with that outcome. So I really think it's important. I really think this information is important for us to understand, at least have as a reference point to how to go about that process. And so just real quickly, what I have is goal setting, number one. Number three, engagement to community and government actors. Number six, I mean, the wrong number's going to get me. Oversight personnel profiles and standards. We have 7, establishment of police policies and procedures. These are ones that I identified that I thought for me when I saw this was important. And then on the second page, writing reports and then identifying, addressing challenges and opportunities. And that's the last one down there. So going back to the first page, there's a lot of steps, a lot of guide points in what we're doing as far as our decision steps. But I thought, at least for me, the ones that I highlighted to you just now were very key, important action steps that I think that we could have. Not that this is a have to or anything like that, but I just thought this would maybe be helpful for us to be able to see and have structure and being able to have the outcomes we're looking for. And I'll open it up to other commissioners at this point.
Yeah, also from that same work that you found, there was some information where I was taking some notes from as well. I didn't bring it up to share my screen though, but it does give, like, first a scope of the commission, and then second, the structure of how that's going to outline. So for instance, for the scope of the commission, it's like complaints, you know, the type of complaints that'll be accepted. If we want to consider how many annually, which I don't know how we'll do that part, will the commission, not our group, but the commission, be making disciplinary policy and training recommendations? Final decision maker for complaints, will they be that final decision maker for the complaint? What happens when there's a disagreement? So making sure that that's kind of discussed between the commission and the police department. Will the commission offer a mediator? Will they have subpoena authority, effectiveness measured? And how will elected officials hold the commission accountable? So those were some of the things that it went through for the scope of the commission, and then setting the structure, which that kind of gets to some of the stuff that you have up on the screen there for the section 2.
Thank you, Commissioner Ellsworth.
So that was also from the NACOLE.
Can we go back to people real quick, please? Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. And so with that being said, I guess, is there any other comments or input from any other commissioners? Please, Commissioner Williams, then Commissioner Root.
In addition to the stuff around complaints and discipline, which is kind of a swampy area that I'm not sure that we're going to be happy with because of the involvement of the union and the collective bargaining agreement and so forth. We might be shut out of a lot of that. I would also hope that the commission have some ability to learn what the police department practices and policies are, and to critique those, have some ability to critique the practices and policies of the police department aside from complaints. I would also, one of my goals for the commission would also be that the commission have some involvement with the dispatch system, the 911 system, in terms of who gets calls by 911. And I think that the board should also have some involvement in terms of getting information and critiquing the early warning system or the early intervention system and the accreditation of the police department. So involvement not just in the discipline of individual police officers, but also broader in terms of the policies and procedures and operations of the police department that don't involve the particular individual police officers. That's one of my, I guess you'd say, visions of what this commission would be concerned about.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Commissioner Root.
Thanks.
Sorry. Was that Commissioner Root?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
No, please.
I'll come in. Okay. I like that we've started out, both Kelly and Chuck, with kind of an overview approach to what we need to accomplish by the time we get to the end. And, I agree with all of Kelly's points. And the more I look at the steps in the NACOLE guidebook, the more it seems to me we're going to have to address all these issues, with the possible exception of coalition building, because we've already got the study committee set up. So I just think this is really helpful. Another comment that Kelly made that I thought was really helpful in terms of next steps, moving from the overview to what to do next. I think maybe we can combine Chuck's point about goals and Kelly's point about the scope of the commission, which is what Eric Williams was just referring to as well. It seems to me that those go well together, and that maybe that's our next big step, is to look at goals and scope. And then maybe we could come back to getting some more information about complaints and use of force. Some of the things that we clearly all need to have more of a common knowledge about. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Root. Commissioner Harrell.
So to piggyback off that, I think the more that we talk about goals and scope, the more we're going to have to consider how each additional thing that we sort of put under the purview or would like to put under the purview of the Civilian Review Board is going to have a financial and staffing impact, right? So when we talk about the various models that we could potentially implement, and then we start talking about things like subpoena power, now we're talking about having trained investigators who are able to do that. So that's no longer a volunteer committee issue. So, you know, unless we, and so we're in a chicken and egg situation, right? We don't really know how much in terms of financial support we might get from the city, but I imagine we're not thinking about putting together something that is $90,000 for the committee director and then $42,000 a year for 3 trained investigators, right? So in essence, we need to potentially address what that level of financial support is going to be in order to limit and focus more narrowly on what the scope should be.
Councilmember Bacon and Commissioner Root is next.
I think as you guys are building this out, something I just thought about based on a couple things that were said, you may need to develop, this is going to be a unique and unusual commission. I think everyone's going to need a baseline or at least know the language of policing and that type of thing. There's going to be a need to have a curriculum or something as you onboard these people so they speak the language and read the reports and do that type of thing. You need almost like a CE or continuing education or some type of thing as you're onboarding people onto this. So there has to be, when the original commission's seated, I think you're gonna have to onboard them and teach them so they're actually speaking the same language that law enforcement and the union's gonna be speaking so they can have constructive conversations. So something educational around that just kind of stands out as to me as you're building this out. So.
Do you have, I know Commissioner Root and then Commissioner Garcia is next, but I wanted to follow up. Do you, have you seen or have you had experience in maybe doing that as far as helping us help them, you know, once they're doing their thing by chance, or is that just kind of something we need to work on?
Just so to be more effective, just so you're speaking the same language. If you're broadening the scope, the knowledge of the commission has to be broad enough for the scope that you want to take on. These are my opinions. These aren't anything like that. If you're going, the broader the scope is, the more adept the commission's going to have to be at dealing with that scope. So that's all. It's just kind of up to you. I just say as we got to build out both ways. It's got to go as wide as we are deep. So every time you build out more bandwidth, we got to go a little deeper in what the knowledge base and how we're going to build the actual commission out. You know, to make sure it's effective. And you know, I just because frankly, I don't think the deeper you go into that side of law enforcement, if you don't speak the language and don't know, I'm unsure how effective you'll actually be. So I'm just I think there's a knowledge base that's necessary, whatever that looks like. That just table that. But as you're building out just build out depth as well. You know what you're thinking for how you want your commissioners to be built as you're building into the future. Just something I'm thinking about right now. So it's way off in the future, but put a pin in it.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Bacon. Commissioner Root and then Commissioner Garcia.
Just a quick comment on Cedric Harrow's point about the financial implications. I think if we look at goals and scope at our next meeting, and then the meeting after that, look at complaints and use of force, we'll get a lot more information about the number of complaints that we have, which will ground us in the specifics of East Lansing situation. We've had 3 to 8 complaints from the public per year. That will give us some understanding that before one gets to the sort of more theoretical budget issues. So I think getting more information on those things will really help us. Thanks.
Chuck, you're frozen. Is it my turn?
No, yes, I was waiting for you, Commissioner Garcia. Thank you.
All right, sorry. So in conversations that I've had regarding this topic back when I was employed at LPD and then attending staff and command, which for some of you that might not know what that is, it's like a police academy for wannabe future chiefs. Whenever we talked about citizen review boards, we always had the discussion that, and I've had this discussion with others here, that it should be a prerequisite for that commissioner to kind of have completed a citizen police academy, so that with what Councilmember Bacon is talking about, they know to speak. They have they get an experience of what those officers are experiencing on the road, decisions they have to make at a split second. So maybe that goes along with the conversation that Mr. Bacon was having about learning the role, learning the language, learning even the culture. And I know that in speaking to some of the members at East Lansing Police Department, Interim Chief Gonzalez or Chief Johnson, maybe you can speak on it. Well, you're probably not doing it under COVID now, but when's the last time you had a Citizens Police Academy?
Yeah, we generally do a Citizens Academy on an annual basis. We've had anywhere from 10 to 20 people in the academy. Over the last, I would say 5 to 7 years, we have not hit that annual target, largely because of financial implications. We haven't had the ability to run the academy. Last year we ran one. We had intended to run one in 2020. Of course, that got derailed with COVID. So, and I think that goes right along with community engagement, policing efforts.
I'm sorry, that's my dog. I'll mute myself.
So I just wanted to throw that out there. I don't know if anyone has any support of that, or it's something we should just move on to, something else we should move on to.
Any other comments? Commissioner Haro?
And I'd just like to chime in that I think that's a great idea. So from an academic standpoint, right, I've had a few of my master's students conduct their thesis on public perceptions. And, you know, generally what we find is that the average person thinks that they have a pretty good idea of what police do, and the average cop thinks the average person has no idea what they do, right? And personally, I've spent probably over 300 hours in a patrol car, and most of that time, the people that we encountered assumed that I was a plainclothes detective, and so they treated me like a police officer. And it honestly, until you're out there and you're able to experience some of that sort of stuff, you know, you're never truly going to get an understanding, even a little bit, of what the job is like. So I think a Citizens Police Academy for commissioners is an excellent idea.
I will second that myself. It's very, I've had it, not the East Lansing Police Department, but I've participated in Citizen Academy before, and ride-alongs, you know, as little time that you spend overall comparatively, especially with the ride-along, it's such a great way to really get a great perspective, real life perspective, and kind of really being able to advocate and maybe talk on some of the issues that we're discussing. So I agree with that 1000%.
This is Quentin. What is the time commitment for that?
Chief Johnson?
A full Citizens Academy runs about 10 to 14 weeks, depending on how we structure it. You can do it quicker, and in terms of commission members, we could probably run a specific one just for commissioners, so that we can tailor training to what commissioners want to see, and maybe even compress the timeline a little bit.
Yeah, certainly do an abbreviated version of it.
Yeah. And the only reason why I say that, because I don't like putting barriers or limitations on folks' ability to serve. You know, if you think about people who have childcare, maybe they're not able to attend in that capacity. So just looking at it from an equity lens, want to make sure we have all those factors under consideration. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Tyler. Commissioner Williams.
I don't want to be against education, and I certainly think that learning more about how police, what the police profession entails is a good thing. But I'd also like to remind us that one reason that we are in this endeavor is to change the policing culture, if we can. And so I wouldn't want to see us embed ourselves totally in the policing system as it exists now. I'm aware that the NACOLE organization has trainings and things that citizen review boards should know. That may involve things other than, the police academy. So I don't want to be against going through a citizens police academy, but there are, for example, homeless people who have a culture that perhaps police officers are not as familiar with as they should be. There are people with mental health situations, people in domestic situations, and you get into the area of social work, an area that none of us probably on this call are familiar with. And there's a lot of training that goes into that. So in reviewing police work, I think it would be useful for the commission members to be able to think outside the box and be familiar with other domains of practice other than what's going on inside a particular police department.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Before Commissioner Joseph goes and then Vice Chair Williams, I totally like that, because I think, maybe having a blend of both and exposure to both is maybe a good compromise in regards to how, we talk about setting the baseline for them to be, prepared for the opportunity. I think, real life experience out there, seeing what they do in that perspective, but also, NACOLE has done it, and they've been doing it all around the country with their trainings, with their information, with their data, in a way that would set our future commissioners up for success. Commissioner Josephson, and then Vice Chair Williams, please.
I was going to say that I 100% agree with Commissioner Williams, because that's something where I'm learning about right now, is about how through the police culture, through sometimes police academies, can get, sent down through generations. And I think if we want to have commissioners with an open mind, I think, like you guys were saying, it is important to have a blend of different career elements of, like, the social work, the policing side, so they can have a, I guess, equal mindset when it comes in. They're not so much biased with the policing background. And I do, like you guys were saying, also think it is important for them to have some sort of, I would say, elevated education when it comes to policing, so that they can understand what's actually going on when, if they ever need to review reports or thoroughly analyze data. I think it's important if they know a little bit more about the background.
Thank you. Vice Chair Williams, and then Councilmember Bacon, please.
My first comment is going to be, I'm going to have to completely disagree with the situation in regards to not wanting our commission to have the thought process of a police officer. And the reason that I say that is because all of us have done this. We have judged somebody else's job, whether that's a teacher, a lawyer, a nurse, or a doctor. And I think that it is very important for our commission to see and understand what the police officers do go through. And I do believe that as they hire the commissioners, that I would hope we would hire people or include people who are able to have an open mind and take all of the valuable information from that policing academy, because again, we're coming back to circle. They have to understand the words, they have to understand the culture and the terminology. And even though we want to make change, we can't necessarily make change by ignoring what's already there. That doesn't work, and it's not practical for anybody. The other thing that's also very important too is, if you haven't noticed, there are positions on the city website for social workers that will be working with the police department. So again, having the Citizens Academy, I think it's very practical, and it's something that should be done. We need to see where people are coming from. Whether or not we agree with how they do it is a whole different story as to seeing really what's happening by doing that Citizens Academy. But then also we are going to have the ability to work with social workers amongst the city of East Lansing, which is important because that is the community that we are trying to serve, in addition to also having other social workers in different backgrounds and stuff like that in the social work area from the surrounding region as well. So to sum this all up, I think it's important that there should be a Citizens Academy because they do need to have the verbiage. They need to understand in a deeper capacity than just coming in as a citizen.
Thank you, Vice Chair Williams. Councilmember Bacon, please go ahead.
Yeah, and I don't want to derail the meeting with this. I just want, my point kind of is along Commissioner Williams' points, but if it's 1 day, it's 2 days, it just needs to be more than handing them a binder and saying you're on the police commission kind of thing. There has to be more credibility than that to go and then make policy and do those types of things. So if it's 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 14 weeks, whatever, it doesn't necessarily none of that. It's just the point that you're gonna have to validate this commission kind of each time you seat it, because you're depending on the depth that you want to go with what you want to do, get done. You can't, this is part of this is the issue that many of us have with how are police trained, how are this, that, and the other. Well, we have to know those things. That's all I'm getting at. I don't want to derail your process with this because this could be down the road, but just as you're building out that bandwidth, just consider how deep you want to go with that. So.
Thank you, Councilmember Bacon. And before you go, Commissioner Haro. So I just want to make sure that maybe it's just me, but as we're talking about this, we're talking about goal setting. And I think as this discussion is going, we all can agree that the commission that will be developing here will have to have some type of training. And how much training this is in this area and how much training is in that area is still in discussion. But I think that's where we're leaning towards as far as our baseline or our foundation to build off from is what I think I'm hearing. Commissioner
secondarily, particularly having sat in on the police chief interviews and that types of things. So saying police culture, that's broad. I heard there was 4 different guys, people and woman in that process, and there was 4 different cultures. So you'll have to have a deep understanding of East Lansing's culture in their policing, good, bad, or indifferent, and then work from there, from that baseline. We can't come from, and if anyone's biased in some ways, in fairness to law enforcement, I mean, we take in media, law enforcement's taught to us a lot of different ways through media, through all these different things. And there's 1,800 shows about what law enforcement is. So I think we've got some overcoming to do as well to make sure we're giving fair assessment and that kind of thing, to what it really looks like on a day-to-day basis. So that was kind of it, just so we're not biased in our perception. So.
Understood, Councilman Bacon. Thank you for that follow-up on that. It's really helpful. I think we have Commissioner Haro and then Commissioner Callwood.
So to speak to Councilmember Bacon's point, I think potentially we've skipped a step here, which was to identify the impetus for starting a commission, right? I think we shouldn't necessarily come into this with the framework that we're going to establish a civilian review board because there was a problem with the East Lansing Police Department. We could certainly argue about whether or not there have been problematic incidents. But first of all, we're not here to sort of fix systemic issues in policing in general, right? That's a national conversation. So I think it's important for us to think about, in terms of what our goals are, why we're here in the first place, right? As Commissioner Root noted, we're not talking about a department that experiences 25, 30, 40 complaints every year, right? So there has to be, again, some of that underlying foundation of where are we starting from? We can't come in here and say, well, we're going to fix a problem if a problem doesn't exist. There may be one or two officers that have experienced or that have engaged in problematic behavior, but that doesn't mean there's a broad problem. There may be in policing nationwide, but that's beyond our scope.
Thank you, Commissioner Harrell. Commissioner Callwood, and then Vice Chair Williams after her.
I think along the same lines as Commissioner Harrell, I think one thing that I'm still kind of stuck on is I think we started here with like what our work plan is. And I'm just trying to understand the framework of the deadline that we have. So if we have 6 months from the last, from the first meeting that we have, and I'm just looking, I know the agenda, the work plan rather that was sent to us is just kind of like a draft. But I'm also a person that's written like a 200+ dissertation. Trying to do like a draft within a month, and then you know, having approvals and like, you know, being able to have a conversation around that. I just think it's also important for us to figure out what is our timeline that, you know, we're gonna have this, you know, conversation about XYZ, have an understanding of like the goal setting, for example. So if I'm looking at the NACOLE key steps and decision points, a majority of these I imagine we're also gonna go through together. But having some structure, because one thing that I'm worried about, it's almost 7 o'clock. And so I know that time can get away from us on these meetings. So just making sure that we're also kind of sticking to kind of a structure so that we walk away from these meetings having something tangible, like, okay, we've accomplished this thing. And we've, I think, all been kind of preparing and planning for this. And that's something that we expanded on last time. But I think also having guest speakers come in, you know, how much time are we also allotting to that? And then having to have a discussion about that and then incorporating that into things. So I think I just want to be all of us on the kind of same page about like, what is our structure? What are we walking away from each meeting trying to accomplish, and having some like concrete things that we are like, okay, this is part of it. I think the other thing to consider is, are we going to wait until the end to start writing this report? Are we going to try to kind of break it down into sections so that by the time we get to February, March, we're not trying to then put together an entire report? So it's kind of some things that I've been thinking about to also kind of help with the structure.
Thank you, Commissioner Caldwell. I have the same concerns, especially with the time limit and the body of work that needs to be done. And this kind of really how we're set up. I just don't really think, honestly, with what we're doing, the time frame allotted and the time that it takes to do this is realistic. And so I think, you know, how I was trying to figure it out was trying to break it down in sections. So, for example, if we don't get all 10 things done overall, we can have at least 3 strong things done with the time that we have. It's solid work. It's good in-depth work. We're not just trying to rush to get all this stuff done, but we really have 3 things to do that with, and then worry and hope for having the extension upon what we're doing and further commitment from obviously this commission. But I struggle with it with you as well when it comes to that as well, Commissioner Caldwell. I didn't see who had their hand raised before I started talking. Vice Chair Williams.
One of the things that I went back to the document that the city had sent, and it states the mission of the study committee shall be to take testimony, review evidence, and examine the methods by which other communities review complaints of police misconduct with a special emphasis on racial and ethnic injustice, right? So we keep talking about the goals here, and I don't think really any of us we've really come up with any of the goals that we want this commission to do. But that's the standard the city gave it to us, is to really focus on the racial and ethnic injustice. And how are we going to do that and bring that to the commission that we have? The other thing that's important to know, not to say this should be a reason to not get things done, but we also have the option to seek an extension from the city if 6 months isn't going to cut it. At this point right now, I feel like 6 months isn't going to cut it compared to, you know, the time frame that we have, the things that we haven't even discussed yet, and we're at 7 o'clock, and compared to the last meeting last time. So I think if we could try to steer our focus back to what the city is asking of us, to bring in this racial and ethnic injustice viewpoint to what the commission is going to do when it comes to complaints and things like that. In addition to, I think we should leave this with a tentative schedule, to be honest, this meeting today.
Yes, and so I guess when it comes to, when we go to the next step and come to the next meeting, you know, I know we had discussed maybe possibly having subcommittees in a way where we can have a few people work on something very specific that we talk about, which is important. So then when we come back here, we have action steps going further when it comes to having productivity. Because as you're right, we've been talking for quite a bit of while right now, but there's nothing really to show from that discussion. And so I'm with you on that. And I'm just willing, I'm open to hearing kind of how the overall body wants to be able to attack, for example, the in-between work that needs to be done, the time frame that we have, and what we need to be doing right now today. And what do we want to get accomplished with this discussion that we'll have to move on here in a few minutes or so to next parts of our agenda. What is it exactly that we want to get done today? If in fact that's setting something up for tomorrow or in between tomorrow, our next meeting, what is it that you're thinking that we need to be doing right now as a body? Commissioner Root and Commissioner Ellsworth Etchison?
My suggestion is that we try tonight to figure out what we're doing at our next 2 meetings. And to also figure out how we're going to make the schedule for the whole time, what we hope will be 6 months, at least tentatively. I think trying to get that 6-month agenda tentatively tonight is going to be difficult. I think we've made progress talking about what we think needs to be included in it by Kelly's ideas and looking at the NACOLE steps. But I think if we can get agreement on our next 2 meetings so that we can keep moving and then figure out, maybe 2 or 3 people can come together and, draft for us a way to get these decisions made, these key steps and decision points, how to set that into a 6-month schedule. And we could look at that, maybe at our next meeting. But I think trying to accomplish that all tonight, it's not likely to be good quality work. But if we can decide good quality, what we'll do the next 2 meetings, we really need to do that so we can move forward.
Commissioner Williams?
I'd like to remind everybody that there's a pandemic on, and we are in a Zoom meeting. And ordinarily, a group of people, we get around a table or in a room, and we meet each other, and we get a lot more information from each other when we meet in person. And there's always in a committee like this, we have to spend time getting to know each other and knowing what everybody's agenda is. And we just don't have that on Zoom. So I agree that I think it was Tonya Williams that said, it's probably a compelling reason to ask for more time, because this is a very complicated issue. People come from different directions. We don't know each other. We've just spent a couple of hours with each other. And we probably need more time. If we're going to do this whole thing by Zoom, we probably need more than the 6 months.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Commissioner Ellsworth Etchison and Councilmember Bacon, please.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Commissioner Williams, for bringing up the injustice part, and that's our guide. And we have some information from where to start from. And we do all come with different perspectives. While we are approaching this with an open mind, let's not forget that we all do come to this conversation with some sort of biases, for either for or against, or from our own personal experiences, whatever that may look like. And so that is going to be part of the conversation. And so while we may not have that, the East Lansing police may not have had that many complaints, doesn't mean that there's not an issue. I personally have had 2 situations that I probably should have come forward and filed complaints, but I didn't. But so I'm saying that to say that we don't want to also discount that there's not an issue because there's not been formal complaints filed. But I think with this group, I don't feel like the time has been wasted because we are all new coming together. I only know a couple of you, so I've never worked with you before. We're trying to flesh out, kind of get like our sea legs underneath us. And I get that we've got a time limit and we've got to get work done. So today we came to the meeting. We had homework last time to go in and kind of research what setting up a commission looks like, as there was some confusion and we were kind of stepping into some other waters in our last meeting as if we were going to be part of the commission ourselves. And so so we walked away with some understanding that we've got some homework to do. We went and we researched that. We looked at the NACOLE, what the guidelines for that. Really at the very beginning, when I looked at a document by them, it was like, we need to talk about the scope of the commission. The structure comes later, but the scope of what this commission is going to be doing. And so that's where we need to like kind of hone in and focus in on, what would be ideal, because there's going to be this training, right, that the commissioners need. I know that this part, what I'm going to say is not practical, but I think if it could be done, it would be awesome. But I know it probably can't be because it's not practical. But when you talk about role playing, things go both ways, right? There's a two-way street. And so while there's going to be this training on what's a day in a life like for the police and what they have to go through and the decisions that they have to make in, a split second and all of that, it sure would be also nice for the police to understand what a citizen goes through and what paralyzing fear it is for a Black person in particular when we see lights behind us, and that paralyzing fear that just takes over, where you may behave in a certain way that you would have never thought you would have behaved in. And I'll give you an example from my world in banking. And so one of our colleague credit unions down in the Detroit area, we all go through robbery training, right? And a lot of times we bring in the police to help us with that robbery training. And so, but this particular employee had all this robbery training, but when showtime happened, when someone actually presented themselves with a gun, she told the robber to go F off instead of like just giving him what she knew she had trained for. But something happened inside of her in that moment. And so he was stunned. He didn't know what to do. And he actually left, thank God. But then there was all this fear later where she was paranoid and thinking he was going to come back for her. So I'm just saying all that to say that there's all of these different experiences on the police side and on the citizen side. And so as we start that's not going to be our work. That'll be the commission. But I'm just saying, when we talk about training, man, would that be ideal if we could also have a two-way training so that people understand what a citizen goes through as well. It's not just police.
Thank you, Commissioner Elderworth Edgerson. Before Commissioner Noel Garcia goes and Vice Chair Williams, I want to kind of start wrapping up this discussion in a way where we can either go upon maybe Commissioner Root's suggestion about setting up for the next two meetings or the next meeting and what we're going to be focusing on when it comes to this conversation that we're having today, because we do have other items on the agenda to kind of really go through and understand. And I think for me, just real quickly, that a lot of the conversation last month or last couple of weeks was data and getting that data and understanding that data and analyzing in a way where we're have knowledgeable experience in being able to know how to go forward in setting this up. And so we will be getting a big chunk of data right after this discussion here, and that may help us be able to kind of understand what the next step. And I know, I think Commissioner Garcia had said that the work schedule that's set up right now is a good place. So we need to really kind of wrap this thing up and not finish the conversation, but kind of wrap it up to conclusion of what we're going to do about it or not going to do about it, and then go on further in our meeting. Commissioner Root. or excuse me, Commissioner Garcia. And then
With that
Commissioner-
being said, I'm just going to say I'm in total agreement that we need to have a couple bullet points as to the next, or a couple agreements on the next couple meetings. And then I'm looking forward to hearing this presentation by Assistant Chief Gonzalez on data that we've been asking for. Data. I've kind of briefly perused through it and it intrigued me. So I want to hear that. So I am in total agreement. We need to move on. Thank you.
Commissioner Root.
Can I suggest what we can try to conclude from this part of our discussion?
Please.
That next week we would do three things. We would try to agree on goals. We would try to begin exploring the scope of an oversight commission. That's a very big topic. So we're not going to agree on that next time. We're going to explore it. We're going to start an exploration next time. And that we would also decide what we would like to hear from the police at the meeting after that, because we need more information. Those are three things I propose that we set ourselves to do next time. And in regard to exploring the scope of a commission, we need to, before we leave tonight, have some way that we know we can share information with each other about resources that we think are helpful for the discussion about the scope and models of oversight commissions.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Root. And I know Vice Chair Williams is going. So from what I understand, you're proposing worrying about what their goals are going to be, exploring what the scope is, and then looking at the police presentation schedule as actionable steps for next meeting. Okay. Vice Chair Williams, please go ahead.
One of the things, to circle back to Kelly's point, I think it would be a good idea to get somebody on board based in biology, because everybody's personal experience is their own. So I think it would be difficult for all of us to be able to feel the fear that other people feel, right? But I think it would be a good idea to have somebody who come in and understanding the human body and the biology of that and what happens, and the psychology as well would be a good idea when it comes to, you know, guests or speakers. The other question that I have is, can we get somebody, I don't know about you guys, but for me, my mind is a little bit stuck when it comes to what the scope of this commission can be and the goals because of the POAM. So I kind of wanted to know if there's, I mean, I know that there are legal things we can and cannot do in addition to the union and what they have going on. So is there any way to reach back out to them or get any further information from them, seeing how their last list was from May?
Absolutely. I'll definitely follow up with staff and City Manager Lahanas on that, because it is important. Is there any more discussion? I want to wrap this thing up. Is everyone in a kind of a general agreement that, you know, we need to kind of really have those actionable steps that Commissioner Root suggested? I know a couple of people commented through the chat in support of that, and I think that's a great way to kind of build off from. Is there any more discussion just specifically to that? Councilmember Bacon.
Yeah, specifically to the timeline and discussion around extensions. I think the urgency is there. That goes right down my spine. It brings out the coach in me. I don't think we even discuss anything around timelines until we have a framework and begin working. The urgency is part of the importance of the project and that kind of thing. Actually discussing extensions 2 weeks into the project's a little bit disheartening. I think that just demands that we're more focused and that type of thing, and that maybe things are done outside of here, like you guys were discussing, whatever that looks like within compliance. But yeah, I'd like us to stay focused on what's at hand and not even consider anything on the horizon along the lines of an extension. That way, that energy stays in the process. So we're not thinking, oh, well, there's a back end and there's a way out. Pretend like there's no way out, and that it's as urgent as a project as it is. I mean, that's why you signed up for this, because it is urgent and people were urgent to be seated. Now it's time to be urgent about the work. That's just kind of how it is. So not to lecture or anything like that, but that energy needs to stay in the group and not be, we don't need an escape hatch at week 2. So pretend like it's 6 months, and that's what we have to work with right now. So that's it. And I'm gonna be quiet.
Chuck, I got a
Thank you,
quick comment right quick.
Yes, please, Commissioner Tyler.
And I'll just say this, and maybe I missed it, but what was the issue with the timeline that you provided earlier? Maybe I missed that. The plan of work?
Nobody has disagreed to that timeline that was given by Mr. Lahanas.
Okay.
I think that timeline came from direct counsel and the creation of what we were doing. And again, there's extensions, stuff like that. But I agree with Councilmember Bacon. We're in the moment right now. What can we get done now? What can we build off from? And and I think what we're going to do and going forward is, I think all the commissioners really probably should, especially with Vice Chair Williams' point about why we're here and what has been mandated for us to focus on, and really put our thoughts around those specific goals of that, exploring the scope of how we want to get that done, and then maybe talk about the data, information, and presentations that we do get. So by the time we come to our next meeting, everyone has their thoughts thought out about that, and has an idea about what they would like to see on the outcome. With that being said, I think I'm going to move on if that's appropriate, unless someone has something more they want to add to that discussion. Commissioner Root.
Chuck, I don't think we've answered the question of how people are going to be able to, before next meeting, well before next meeting, share resources about different types of oversight commissions, so we can do some reading before we get together. Should we send them to you, or what should we do?
Okay, so your question is, how do we communicate with each other and sharing resources, basically,
Before the next meeting.
Gotcha.
About
Yes.
the subject.
So I'll say this officially. Send what you have to me that you want to share to my email to me, and then I will forward that to Diane, and then she will disseminate it out accordingly to the overall commission. And that way we can be within OMA and all the different restrictions when it comes to that information. But when you do send information, or when you do want to do that, if you want everyone to have access to that, send it to me, and then I'll send that information out to others. And you are able to email individually and talk with each other about what you're thinking about as well. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just if you want to have that information be shared and for us to be productive for that next meeting, it's definitely important for you to send that to me so I can send that information out. Is there anything else on this? Yes, Commissioner.
I'm sorry, there has been an attendee with her hand raised almost this whole time. I said it earlier in the chat, but I don't think anyone paid attention to it.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. I'm sorry.
There's an attendee, Crystal Rose Davis, with her hand raised. She's had her hand raised for like at least 20 minutes now.
You mean for public comment? We've passed that section in our agenda, and we're kind of behind time right now. So based on Deputy Chief Gonzalez, for your presentation tonight, not to put you on the spot, but how long is that presentation you think is going to go for you?
Depends on questions, probably 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay. We did not have any calls in tonight, and we did have a section for public comment. And I know for me personally, getting public input is very, very important. Are there any commissioners who are open to hearing from public comment, even though we've passed that section in our agenda?
I'm open to it.
Okay, I think we had 3 or 4 hands up. If we could take a quick moment to revisit Council or Commissioner Ellsworth Edgison's motion. I think that was back to 3 minutes, you said, for public comment. Is that what we decided to do for this evening? Okay, so yeah, let's go ahead and do that. If you just don't mind, if you don't mind, please, Deputy Gonzalez, we'll just hold you up just for a quick second. Before we jump to that next section of that, we are completed with item 3.1 as far as about that basic plan of what we have coming into the next meeting. If you have information, send it to me and I'll get it sent out to Diane, and then Diane will send it out to the group so that way it can be public record. Okay. Any last thoughts on that? I'll move on.
Just real quick, is there a reason why we wouldn't send it to both you and Diane?
Yeah, you can do it that way either. I was just trying to have everyone be able to have one place to send it. So then once I had it all, I could tour it. But whatever, yeah, Diane and me, sure, no problem. When it comes to that, I don't have any issues with that. I just thought it'd be simple that way, but no worries. Whatever you want to do, as long as, again, we do it in the format one way or other during that way. All right, Justin, do you have access to be able to bring the caller in for public comment for 3 minutes?
Yes, I do.
Please.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for permitting me to speak. I thank you all for your time, in service to forming this oversight committee. It's several things that I want to comment on that's been kind of pressing for me or frustrating is, I was part of the civilian or citizens that, was championing this resolution and this, for the study committee or the oversight committee. And it's, through council, it's changed a bit than what we had originally had hoped for. And I appreciate all of you guys, talking about various perspectives and making sure that you're considering citizens' experience as well as policing experience. But, and you guys have a heavy feat to try to figure out what it is that we're doing, why it is that we're doing it. And I think that's very important. And I appreciate whoever brought that up, bringing back the why you guys were here. And so really y'all figuring out how you guys are going to achieve that, goal. And I really think for the success of this group that you guys should really consider a facilitator, because the goal of this group is that you guys are coming from multi-disciplinary backgrounds and experiences. And, for the objectives are kind of clearly outlined already by City Council what the purpose of the group is. I think in order to have constructive progress and feedback and making sure we are getting, or you guys are getting group consensus, is that you guys have a facilitator, someone that's not invested in the outcome of it. Because I don't know who mentioned that, but yes, everyone comes with bias. Everyone is pro or against this, but what the purpose of this is that reform is needed. It doesn't matter how many complaints that the police officers get or not. It doesn't matter how many bad apples it is. We're focused on positive policing and reshaping what public safety looks like. And so, I come from public health background, come from a social work background. There's multiple frameworks and facilitation methods that I can suggest and help as well, you guys structure so that you guys are being able to have productive meetings so you don't get that meeting fatigue that often happens when you're having roundabout conversations. But I agree, whoever mentioned that it does need more structure and you guys need to adopt a formalized framework. And I know oftentimes you guys are using or trying to enforce Robert's rules, but in this conversation and this work that you guys doing, you guys are going to want public feedback. You're going to want public a part of that group discussions. And I would, encourage you guys to break off in rooms or a group to have these conversations and work on group consensus so that the time that you guys are devoting here is impactful and that there's not too much work that's happening outside of the group. And so, I have a lot of other things that I wanted to touch on. I thank you for Eric Williams for bringing up various perspectives around having social workers or even doctors and things of that sort, or different disciplines to bring in scope,
The 3
thinking about
minutes has
barriers.
expired.
It's so much more that I have to say, but anyway, thank you for allowing me to make a comment. But I'm one of those citizens that is
Crystal?
invested in this.
Crystal, we didn't give you kind of a warning that your time was running out, so I'm open to giving you about another 15 seconds or so just to kind of finish your thought up, if that's okay with the commissioners.
Yeah, there's a lot of different things, but again, people were bringing up all these varying different perspectives. But I wanted to say, as a resident of the city, as a HRC member, as a person of color in this community, that I'm invested in the outcome of this group. And I value you guys' time, and I want to support you guys through that. But I think that there are other methods. CHOPS is one of those facilitation methods that you guys can consider. But I would think it would be more helpful for you guys to bring in facilitators to help move the work along.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your call in. We appreciate your passion in regards to the things that we're talking about. And to me, I think public comment is absolutely essential. I do know that we discussed, just kind of for some of your participation interest, is that we did have a discussion in our first meeting in regards to opening up to public and just having a discussion meeting where we could possibly be in a situation where we could really break down some of the different things that you've been hearing us talk about or not talk about, and really deep dive into those and have a format similar to where we can break out into groups and maybe have that format available to the public. I know that that's something that we as a commission had discussed that, and I know that's something that most of the commissioners are open to. So we definitely will value how to maybe do what we're doing more effectively as we learn about each other and learn about how we want to go about achieving these goals. So we definitely want the community involved with that conversation. Do any other commissioners have any comments to the caller? Thank you. And we'll move on to item staff reports, item 4.1. Thank you, Deputy Chief Gonzalez, for your patience in our long-winded point to get here. We appreciate you. So please feel free to go ahead as you choose.
All right, good evening. So Justin's going to be flipping slides for me, so bear with us here. Tonight's presentation has to do with data and the training that our department has gone through over time, and then specifically zeroed in on some recent training that we have done. I do want to kind of preface this with that I fully expect a lot of questions out of the data that we present tonight, and I think there's opportunity to dig, of course, deeper into the data, and would certainly entertain any of those questions and maybe even have to loop back at a later meeting with some of that follow-up. So Justin, if we could go to the next slide. So the first part of this quick presentation is I just want to kind of go back all the way to basics and talk about the training that our police officers go through. Every police officer in the state of Michigan has to be certified by NACOLE, or the Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement Standards, which is the state organization that certifies or licenses, if you will, police officers. You don't get to be a licensed police officer or a certified officer without going through a basic police academy. And you can see that they're about 15 to 17 weeks in length. Primarily, most of the officers that we have, our police department, have gone through a regional law enforcement academy. So think LCC's Police Academy, Lansing Community College's Police Academy. There's several of them throughout the state, but there's also a track program through a few four-year universities where individuals can go through a bachelor's degree program, and at the end of their schooling in their senior year, they go through a police academy as well. And when they graduate with their four-year degree, they're also graduating as an academy graduate and can earn their state certification that way. We do have some officers that have gone through that track program. So once an officer comes out of the police academy, they're hired on by, any number of police departments. And here at East Lansing, we have a field training program that lasts for about 4 to 6 months, depending on how quickly the officer progresses through that field training. At its very most basic, the field training lasts for 50 days. There's 20 DORs, or 20 daily observation reports that an officer has to do, both on the day shift, and then they do another 20 on the night shift. After those 40 are completed, the officer has the option to go through a handful of review days where they get to basically ask any question of their training officer that comes to mind, because they're kind of going into what we call the shadow period, but it's really your final exam. Your final shadow period is 7 days in length, and you're expected to perform the job of a solo patrol police officer. Your field training officer is sitting next to you the entire time, but they're actually dressed in plain clothes. They're not identified as a police officer as much as possible because it directs the trainee to have to deal with everything. They're in full uniform, fully recognized as a police officer. During this field training program, you're constantly being evaluated. Every single day, every single thing that you do, your field training officer writes down every call you go on, every traffic stop you make, and evaluates you on the standards that are built into the program. You have to progress through the program at a satisfactory rate and perform at a skill level that is deemed accessible or acceptable by the program. If you don't, there are some options. The program really is designed to train people. It's not designed to wash people out of the program, but there are mechanisms in place to remediate individuals that are not meeting standards. There's performance improvement programs, extensions in training, those types of things that can occur. And at the end of the day, if they don't meet those standards, if they can't make it through the PIP or the performance improvement program, or if they can't make it through the extension of training, they can be dismissed from employment at the police department. And that does happen occasionally. I do want to point out that just because someone makes it through their 4 to 6 months of training, doesn't mean that we don't further evaluate them. On a monthly basis for their first year and their first year probationary period, they are re-evaluated by both the training officers and then also the training sergeant or the training lieutenant. Up until that 1 year expires, they are on probation with the police department. And if they're not meeting standards, they can be dismissed from employment. And then, just to talk a little bit further in depth about the field training program, there's 48 individual training tasks that the officers have to go through during those 50 days or those 600 plus hours of training. And that's just the actual tasks that we've identified are, critical and core to a police officer's performance. From there, the officers have practical performance things that they have to do, performing out on the street, interacting with individuals, interacting with their peers, things that can't necessarily be captured in a written document or a training task. Can we go to the next slide? Once an officer is past their first year of training, everyone has to go through annual in-service training. And these are done in various formats. For a little while, we were doing annual in-service training for a week at a time in the winter. That has morphed over time, but these are the topics that we do in-service training on. Legal update, both from the Ingham County prosecutor's perspective for state law and case law update, but also from the city attorney's perspective as well for ordinance updates and things that they are identifying as local issues that our officers have to be brought up to speed on. We train on special populations, how to interact and how to work with special populations. One of the things—
Do we have a freeze?
Can you hear me? Hello?
Okay, yeah, for me,
Yes,
it
I
broke
can
up
hear
just
you
for a
now.
secondary, but you're fine now.
Okay, I apologize. One of the things that we do is we train on special populations, how to interact with special populations, how to work with people from special populations. For example, most recently, during our in-service week, we trained on law enforcement's interaction with people with autism. And, that's obviously a very important topic because we have to tailor our approach to how we interact with those individuals quite differently from the general population as well. We do some basic things like first aid, CPR, vehicle operation, and then of course, de-escalation. We, up until this year, we had one de-escalation trainer on staff. We recently, back in August, sent 3 additional officers through de-escalation training so that we can increase our ability to continually evolve our de-escalation program and intermix that with our response to resistance program as well in scenario-based training. And then we also have some special topics that will come in. Everything from officer health and wellness to mental health issues. Sometimes we have our department chaplains come in and talk about, topics such as delivering death notifications and things like that. So we identify special topics throughout the year that we need to bring into our training program to round that out. Can we go to the next slide? So I want to hit particularly on our use of force program. We currently run anywhere from 4 to 5 in-service days a year of use of force training. When I started back in 1997, use of force training was highly focused on just standing on the firing line and using our firearms. That has evolved into defensive tactics, intermediate control devices, so tasers, and then making sure that we recertify our officers on an annual basis on all of those items, whether it's pepper spray, a taser, your firearm, or defensive tactics, your personal defensive tactics. We have to certify on each year, and we make sure that the officers do that. One of the things that we have done most recently over the last 2 years is we have integrated many of these in-service use of force days to scenario-based training. So the officers engage in a scenario with actors, and they have to incorporate their de-escalation training, their interpersonal skills, their use of force skills. And based on how the officer acts, there is a script that goes with that scenario that says, if the officer is not doing a good job with their de-escalation, or if they're actually escalating the scenario, the actor is going to respond appropriately. And so, it gives us an opportunity to kind of have that comprehensive training atmosphere where they can bring all their skills to the table and try to employ them in as close to real world situations as possible. Next slide. This slide here really focuses on our diversity and cultural awareness training that we have done since 2016. And if you look down towards the bottom of the slide, there is a breakout, just for context, of some of the schools that we have done since July of 2020 for fiscal year 21. So on the right-hand side, you can see how many individuals have gone through that particular school or training session, whether all sworn, meaning our entire department has gone through it, or some of these schools are individual schools that we have sent, 1, 2, 3, 4 officers to receive training. One of the things I want to highlight is our proctored tour, Ferris State University Jim Crow Museum. This is an impactful school for me personally, and I always kind of highlight on it because it really resonated with me in my personal life. But what this training does is it takes the officers out of the classroom, and we're not just sitting there listening to a PowerPoint. We're not just listening to a facilitator or an instructor speak, but it allows the officer to go through a proctored tour of this museum and, see, touch, and, really feel what the goal of this training is to do. This particular one shows the history of racism and how it impacts law enforcement and intersects with law enforcement throughout our nation's history. We've had some officers go through there that, they come back and they'll tell you, holy cow, that was really beneficial. That was impactful for me. So I like to highlight that one because it is out of the norm of sitting in a classroom and listening to an instructor teach you on something. Another one that I want to hit, down on the bottom there, you'll see that we have one individual, one of our police sergeants, is going through a 10-month academic-based program to get a certificate in diversity leadership. This is a program that we've never done before, and we hope that this will be kind of the impetus for us to be able to bring a lot of training back to our agency from the inside. This individual will be able to develop training programs and hopefully intersect with some of the training that the city organization as a whole is doing, so that we have our own instructor in-house and we don't have to send people out to different schools. Next slide. Of course, I'm not going to go through this entire list with you, but it is in the agenda packet, and I'm happy to answer any questions about specific schools here. But these are just some of the individual training schools that we've sent officers to throughout calendar year 2020 to date. And I put this up here to demonstrate the breadth of schools that we have to send officers to. Everything from honor guard school, FOIA training, to social networking. And then you can see, just the variety of types of schools that we send officers to, because we have to have officers go to not just employee developmental training, but also training that is, core and basic to their job. So for instance, you have to certify in running the radar for traffic enforcement. A-RIDE is a school that deals with drunk driving. So you have to, be able to train in those specific core areas as well. Go to the next slide. So next thing I want to do is move into the data points. These are the things that I think we'll certainly generate some questions, and I'm happy to bring more information back at further meetings based on this presentation as well. So a couple of things that we're going to talk about, or a few of the things that we're going to talk about here are listed there for you. We're going to talk about the officer initiated contact report, our arrest, race, and ethnicity report, our staff demographics, staffing level trends, and then our calls for service and traffic stop trends over the past 3 years. All right. So we began tracking officer initiated contacts back in February of 2020. This was not a new approach for us. A long time ago, probably, I'm going to guess anywhere from 15 to 20 years ago. The chief could correct me if I'm wrong on that. We did track demographics on all of our traffic stops. That effort stopped at one point in time, and we reinitiated that at council's direction back in February of 2020. What an officer initiated contact is, it's any law enforcement contact that an officer has with an individual that they initiated themselves. It's not contact where, someone calls 911 and an officer responds to a call and ends up contacting an individual. It's a traffic stop. It's a situation where an officer sees an individual walking down the street and they stop to talk to them for some reason. It's anything that the officer self-initiates outside of being sent on a call. We update these numbers monthly, and we try to post these stats to the city's website under the police department page on a regular basis. And if I can have Justin switch to the contact report. There we go. You can scroll through this report. It is updated through the end of September. There is one thing that I want to point out to you at. If you look at February and then look at March and then look at April, you're going to see our contacts, our officer initiated contacts plummet. I think, there's no secret there. Back in March, COVID hit, everything went into lockdown. And we went to a really kind of a protection mode for our staff. So we told our officers, you need to be very careful and very selective in when you're contacting people at your own, on your own initiative, because we don't want them getting sick. We all saw back in April and May what happened to some of the agencies down in Southeast Michigan, and then of course throughout the nation, where there were 20, 30, 40% of police officers out sick simply because of COVID exposures, COVID illnesses, and the like. And when you look at our staffing levels, we have 51 police officers. That could wipe out our entire police department. We are not unique in this. Many of the agencies in Ingham County all switched to this model of very limited officer contacts during COVID. To the point where we actually had a contingency plan of if multiple agencies experienced widespread illnesses, how would we help each other and police each other's jurisdictions? You can see the categories on the left. Those are categories that are placed there within the officer's computer system that they have to input these numbers on. And one of the things I want to point out is the officers have to input these numbers into the system when they make the contact. They cannot submit their daily or the report, which is also tied to their payroll. They cannot submit this report without completely filling out all of the boxes, the drop-down boxes that show up on the screen when they submit this information. Justin, can you scroll all the way down to September? So if you look, the numbers are so small. I'd be remiss if I wouldn't mention that, some of the numbers are so small that we have to talk about the statistical accuracy of these, in a larger sense. But you can see in September of 2020, contacts are coming back up as we, as we contact more people, and the officers have more infrastructure, if you will, to be able to do these types of officer-initiated contacts safely. Can we flip back to the slides? The next thing I'll go on to is our race and ethnicity report. This report is built for us by the state police through our computer system, the records management system that tracks all of our arrests, police reports, that type of stuff. And the way I did this to present this to you today is I broke it out in part 1 crimes, part 2 crimes, and then court-ordered arrests. And you can see the list there of what a part 1 and a part 2 crime is. If you think about part 1 crimes as the crimes that we as an agency have to report to the state and then are reported back further on to the federal level, that's a part 1 crime. The one thing I do want to point out, though, is that a part 1 crime, when I think of it and when a lot of people think of it, we immediately think it's a homicide, it's a sexual assault, a robbery, serious felony crimes. That's not always the case. You look at the larcenies, a larceny from a vehicle, a larceny, from a purse or a retail fraud, or even a identity theft could be, depending on the situation, could be categorized as a part 1 crime. And we certainly experience a lot of those. We do experience a lot of larceny type crimes and frauds. Part 2 crimes, think of local ordinances for lack of a better term. Those are our disorderly conducts, our ordinance offenses, driving offenses, some drug-related offenses as well. And then our court-ordered arrests, those are arrest warrants, whether it's a bench warrant, a probation violation, a misdemeanor warrant, or a failure to appear in court. Those are the orders to arrest that come down from the judge that our officers have zero discretion on. A court order is a court order, and the officers are directed to arrest individuals on those orders. So can we scroll to the next slide? This is what our 3-year trend for part 1 crimes look like. I'm not gonna, read off all of the data on here, but you can see the categories here that the officers have to input into their report. And again, this is built for us by the state police. It is far from perfect, if you ask me. There's a lot of opportunity to dig further into this data, if you will. One of the questions that always comes up, I think, is, what is an unknown category? Well, the officers are relying on their own observations, sometimes their own conversations with individuals to identify what race that person may be. And sometimes the officer just is not comfortable assigning a race to an individual or an ethnicity to an individual because they simply don't know. I always use myself as an example for this because my last name is Gonzalez. But if you look at me, if an officer does not know me, an officer is not going to know that my ethnicity is Mexican. My dad's family immigrated from Mexico back in the 1920s. And so, sometimes officers are not comfortable asking these questions to an individual. And, they might feel more comfortable just checking the unknown box. And I think there's an opportunity to really get that unknown section down to zero, through training and more experience with some of these issues for officers. We can go to the next slide. The next slide is part 2 crimes. Exact same thing, 3-year trend, same categories, and that's what our trends look like. And then we can go to the court-ordered crimes as well. Same thing, 3-year trend, same categories, and you can see the data there in front of you. Okay, next slide. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, all these slides, if I haven't mentioned this, I think I already mentioned it, it is in the agenda packet, so you have a hard copy with you or for you there. Staff demographics, sworn police officers and civilian staff. Right now, in-house, from Chief Johnson on down to the brand new officer, we have 51 police officers. We have 26 civilian staff. Civilian staff includes jail service officers, PACE officers, cadets, records clerks, administrative assistants. Those types of positions are considered civilian staff. What is not included on the civilian staff side, I should mention, are our crossing guards. We do employ anywhere from 10 to 15 crossing guards during the school year, and they're part-time, very part-time contingent employees that of course are only employed during the school year and very limited hours throughout the day. But you can see our breakdown of sworn police officers and our civilian staff there, and the percentages. We have 5 African-American police officers, just actually under 10% when you look at the percentage, 37 white officers. We have 5 Latino officers, 1 Pacific Islander, 1 Middle Eastern American individual, and then 1 or 2 Asian officers. And then you can take a look, and down below, I've broken out our male versus female percentages. And, one thing I do want to point out is, if I'm not mistaken, I believe right now the national average in male, or national average for female officers is about 15%. So we are above that level just by a bit. The next slide. So our department structure, just to kind of give you a little bit of context of where our individuals are working, where our police officers are working. We have a patrol division, investigations, and administration. And you can see who is assigned to each section. We have 2 lieutenants and 6 sergeants. Those are our supervisors on the shifts. We have a lieutenant and 3 sergeants on each shift, both our day shift and our night shift. And then we have 32 police officers on each, or on patrol. We try to break them up evenly between days and nights. So we may have 16 and 16 police officers on patrol when we are fully staffed. And then we have 7 cadets. Those are non-sworn individuals that work our front desk for us. You can see in investigations, we only have 4 detectives, 1 lieutenant, and 1 administrative assistant. And then you can see our breakdown for our administrative section as well. Next slide. This is our department structure when it really focuses on civilian staff. We have our PACE division, which has 1 police sergeant in it. We have 1 administrative section and 7 non-sworn PACE officers. Our jail service officers, we have 6 right now. That is not full staff. I think we are full staffed at 7 jail service officers. Some of those individuals are full-time and some are part-time positions. And then in records, we have a sergeant and 3 records clerks. The clerks are non-sworn. Next slide. Coming online, and we've been working through the background and final interview process for these positions, is our Community Assistance and Proactive Services Unit, the CAPS program. This is what was introduced by Mr. Lahanis back in the summer as part of our revisioning of the police department. We are currently in the process of, or the final processes of hiring 2 police social workers. Those are going to be full-time positions, non-sworn, of course. And then we are going to be hiring 4 part-time neighborhood resource specialists, again, non-sworn positions. So those numbers will add into our civilian staff once they are actually onboarded and full employees. The next slide. The next couple slides are just a couple trends for calls for service. You can see that our calls for service, and when I say calls for service, that's everything from somebody picking up the phone and dialing 911 for a true emergency, to someone calling and saying my car was broken into, or you know, we've even had calls where an animal gets into somebody's house. You know, the typical, you know, there's a bat in my house, can you come help me? Those are captured as calls for service. Everything that comes into the dispatch center is a call for service. And you can see that they are trending down slightly from 2017 to 2019. But over time, that is our rough average of how many calls we respond to in a given calendar year. We can go to the next slide with traffic stops. Those are our traffic stop trends. And again, that's exactly what it is. Every time a car is stopped, those are the numbers that we have seen. I will tell you, 2020, you just saw the officer initiated contact report, is going to be way down, you know, because of the COVID precautions. So, and the next slide, questions. And I think I saw a couple questions in the chat. But I will.
Yeah, Deputy Chief Gonzalez, it's kind of really up to you. I know we have quite a bit of questions, and I just want to keep commissioners aware of our time. I know some of you are concerned about that, but we do. I know there's quite a bit there to break down. So would it be better for us to kind of really address questions during the chat real quick, if you can, just real fast there?
Absolutely. Kind of
You want
lost.
me to read those off?
Yeah, were you? I kind of lost track of the questions as I was trying to.
Yeah. Use of force and on off duty. I guess these are notes and not really questions. I'm not quite sure. I wasn't able to keep track of myself with that. Let's just go ahead and jump to live questions from commissioners to be effective with our time. Commissioner Root, I saw you raise your hand. Commissioner Joseph, I saw your hand. Please go ahead and shoot off. And then Commissioner Williams afterwards. Commissioner Root. Commissioner Josephson. Commissioner Williams.
You mentioned that you had a something that was set up by the state police.
Yes.
Some of your data collection that had to do with the perpetrators of crime.
Yes. So our state records management system, the computer system that we use to input police reports and pull data out from, is designed and maintained by the Michigan State Police. It's a statewide system that numerous police agencies use. And the reports that we use to extract data from that system is built by the Michigan State Police. We don't do it in-house. It's built, you know, by their organization.
Do you have something that would be called an early warning system or an early intervention system?
So, you know, one of the things that when we created that officer initiated contact report, not only can we extract data on the department as a whole, what we're doing as an agency and who we are stopping and contacting as an agency, but we can also break that down by individual police officer. So let's say, you know, I was a bad actor on the agency and, you know, stopping an individual or a group of individuals on a regular basis without reason. When we extract that data, that would be a red flag when you start looking at officers as a whole, who's stopping what type of individual, and that could serve as a red flag for us. The other thing,
those are the demographics of the people who are stopped by police.
Correct, and each individual officer, it will show the demographics of who they're stopping, not just as an agency, but also as an individual officer.
Now, are there other performance indicators or triggers that you would collect as part of that endeavor of finding the performance of the department as a whole or performance of individual officers?
There's two other things that I want to point to. One would be trends of complaints against an officer. So if an officer is having a trend of complaints that maybe we don't sustain individually, but over a course of a year, 2 years, 3 years, an officer has the same type of complaint come in against them, out of the norm, you see a spike in those types of complaints. That could serve as a red flag, and we track that by officers. So we can go into our system and say, Officer A has had X number of complaints over the last 2 years, and it falls outside of the norms of what we're seeing compared against the other agent or the other officers. The other thing that we can do is with our use of force reports. Anytime an officer uses force, they are required to generate a police report. And in that police report, they have to put a specific code. It's called a file class for the type of use of force that they used, whether it's defensive tactics, using their taser, anything, pepper spray, anything like that. And so an officer that has a high instance of use of force reports, in theory, we could extract that data, and that could serve as a red flag as well, or an early warning indicator.
You say in theory, is there a protocol that you use regularly to respond to these deviations in the performance indicators?
Yes, actually, I guess I misspoke in saying in theory. One of the things that we do currently that was a change for 2020 is anytime an officer uses force, the shift supervisor is required to notify police administration. So the chief, myself, or the captain by the end of their shift. And that following day, one of the three of us, usually it's myself or the captain, reviews that use of force and communicates that with the chief, and we track that. So even if maybe that individual use of force is okay, we're still tracking who's using force, which, if someone pops up there every single week, we might have a problem. We need to take a deeper look into that.
I have heard that the state police have something like an early warning or early intervention system that they use for their own officers, and there's a software system that mediates it, that contains the performance indicators, and there's a protocol for regularly reviewing those things. Are you familiar with that system in the state police?
Yes.
Just one quick second, David Gonzalez. Sorry to interrupt you. I just want, please answer this question, but I do want to hear from other commissioners too, Commissioner Williams, if you don't mind, and we can get back to some of your follow-up questions, but I would love to hear the answer to your last question, if you don't mind, please.
Yeah,
I could go on forever, so you may as well stop me now.
All right.
I'll answer this quick one. There's multiple software systems out there. There's a system called IA Pro. Blue Team is the one that you're referring to that the state police use, and I believe the Lansing Police Department is currently using it now. And then there's Guardian Tracker. There's all sorts of products that allow for a more comprehensive use of force tracking. For instance, Blue Team, anytime a use of force is employed, a report has to be done in Blue Team. It routes it through whatever workflow the agency chooses. So maybe it's the immediate supervisor, the shift supervisor, on up to maybe internal affairs if it's a larger agency that has a standalone internal affairs unit, the captain, maybe even the chief. However you want to workflow that, you can really customize it. I think, as you know, any single one of those proprietary type software programs comes with a cost. We explored Blue Team, we explored IA Pro over the last couple of years, and it was cost prohibitive for us at the time. But yeah, those issues those systems do exist out there, and they are very beneficial.
Thank you. Vice Chair Williams, and then Commissioner Ellsworth Etchison, please go.
Yeah, thank you for your time, Deputy Chief. Question for you, circling back to the statistics and data and seeing trends amongst particular officers. And first of all, I like the fact that you guys are doing some different training when it comes to like the Jim Crow stuff and the slavery and how that affects law enforcement. So kudos to that. My question is how are your officers chosen to attend specific trainings?
So if you saw on that list, there is, on the right-hand side of that breakdown, it says all sworn. If it says all sworn, that was department-wide training. And for lack of any better term, that was mandated training. The officers did not have a choice but to attend that. Assigned days were given off of the road or out of their normal division, and they had to attend that training. The individual schools, quite often officers will apply to go to those individual schools. Sometimes they are specialty schools that they want to go to. So there's a school in there that I think is called Gracie Survival Tactics or something like that. That is a use of force specific school that the officers applied to go to, and we sent them as we have funds within our training budget. Our training budget is only $25,000 to $35,000. So we have to be very selective sometimes in what we can send individual officers to. The other way an officer can go to school is if they're picked. Quite frankly, the sergeant that is attending the certificate program in diversity leadership, he was picked and said, hey, guess what you get to do? You get to go to this school. We're not going to pick somebody that doesn't want to go to an individual school, of course, because that's not going to be beneficial for them, ourselves, the agency as a whole. But we do assign certain schools to officers that have that specialty. So that sergeant is right now is our community outreach sergeant. And so he was assigned to go to that school. Just, like if you're a canine handler, you're going to go to canine specific schools, things like that.
Thank you. Commissioner Ellsworth Essingen.
So, well, that's a great segue because my question was around the officer that's going into getting the certification in diversity leadership. So East Lansing, as you know, has a diversity, equity, and inclusion administrator. So I'm assuming, but I'm going to ask, so I don't assume, how will that align? I'm assuming that officer will be working with the city's DEI administrator, or will they just be, doing training on their own without collaborating with the city's officer?
It's a great question because that's a big concern of ours with this program. That officer was enrolled in that program prior to Ms. Hardy taking on the DEI administrator position. So we hadn't yet gone down as a city, as an organization. The city had not yet moved towards the organizational wide training that we are going through with the Truth and Titus collective. So my goal with this is to make sure, obviously, that we align with whatever the city as a whole is doing. But really, this program is designed, and it's not just police officers in this program. It's people from all disciplines. It's really designed so that individuals can bring back training and at least start a program with them within their organization. It is not here's the manual on how to do this. It's here's the tools where you could build your own program, if you will. That's really what it's designed for. And so we think it will probably be an asset to the city's organization as a whole, as we roll out more training and do more facilitated learning on that topic. But yeah, we definitely want that to dovetail right in to what the city as a whole is doing.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the time that you put into that to get us what we need to hear tonight. I really appreciate that. Me, I definitely have some big concerns when it comes to some of the information that was presented. 7% African-American population here in East Lansing. We got over 40% interacting with police. And you talked a little bit about trends and just kind of really, and as we all know, we've kind of had some high profile incidences here in the last year or so that, I think if we would have had an intervention system that was a little bit more updated or a little bit more not in a case of where there could be human error about miscommunication when it comes to who's doing what. I actually am a big fan of the early warning system. And I know you guys inquired about it, and that it's cost prohibitive. And so I called and I just wanted to kind of find out the numbers. And if I'm not mistaken, with the officer population that we have now, For example, the Guardian tracking system, I believe that's around $3,500 to $4,000 initially to set up, and it's like about $1,200 to $1,500 yearly when it comes to maintaining this program and this database. I guess if those numbers are correct, are you saying that that type of amount is cost prohibitive to what you're doing in order to address some of the different things? That's my first question.
Well, with specific reference to Guardian Tracker, if I'm not mistaken, the Michigan State University Police Department uses Guardian Tracker, and I believe the Midland Police Department uses it as well. They use it really as a performance appraisal system. And one of the things that we were looking at, of course, was use of force tracking and complaint tracking, things like that. And the feedback we received from them when we looked into it was that, yeah, you know, it's not going to really be what you're looking for. Blue Team really is kind of like that gold standard. That's what we want when it comes to something like this, because of the customization that you can build into it. You know, it really kind of tailors to your police department, and, you know, the support that it has on the back end from the computer side, which is way above my head.
Yeah.
But, you know, I do want to point out, when, you know, you look at our history over the last 5 to 7 years, when you talk about financial implications, $3,000 to $7,000 a year really can be cost prohibitive for us. We have been losing police officers, we have been losing staff, and it's not just our agency. You know, police departments throughout the state have gone through that. The city and other, you know, departments have gone through that as well. And so we do have to be mindful of some of those costs really can add up. So
yeah, thank you. Thank you. And so, I'm sorry. So yeah, and that goes to my other point. For example, and I'm just using an example because that's the person that I spoke with this Guardian tracking system. I went in and talked to Michigan State Police to ask them specifically how they're using this program, you know, how it works, what do you see the benefits for it, what are some of the different things that you don't like about it. And one of the things that I liked about it was that it was able to really track things and behavior going forward. It was able to really identify that. And there was a system that went to higher up, similar to kind of what we have in play right now. That's a different way, I think, paper oriented. So what I liked about it also is on the other side of this thing is that it really also was able to look at good behavior from police officers and really be able to acknowledge that. And so it worked both ways, because one of the different things we talked about was morale and some of the high turnover of officers and how that can end up being costly, and subsequently even lawsuits for not having a system in place. So my argument would be that, you know, if it's not the standard blue system that Lansing uses, why not consider possibly the Guardian tracking system that at least is an improvement to what we got going on now? And you don't have to answer that, but I just want you to pause for thought, possibly to be thinking about it like that, because it's really, really important when we talk about the data that I just saw and some of the imbalance that's happening within our city when it comes to that. And I've talked quite enough. I had a couple other questions, but I'm going to stop there for the sake of the time of our commission meeting. And I know there's a couple more questions from commissioners, but we want to wrap up our questioning as best we can and get those answers questioned. I think Deputy Chief Gonzalez and Chief Johnson will be more than willing to have additional questions followed up to them as well, as he said earlier. Please, Commissioner Williams.
Can't we, as part of our recommendation, recommend some money issues, recommended that funding be provided for something like a early intervention system that we feel is necessary?
I don't see why not. I think we can recommend anything, whether, you know, that's, you know, kind of really how it works. I don't know, but that's a conversation that I could have, you know, and talk with them about, you know, kind of really that too. But I think that really when we talk about creating this Oversight Commission and have them be able to weigh in on recommendation reviews, policy, things like that, having a database where you can pull this information from on a yearly basis, monthly basis, weekly basis, in a way that they could see once they're trained to understand these different things, then all of a sudden they have the ability to be able to speak on it as far as improvement, advisory, or recommendation when it comes to some of the different things. And I really believe that we need to have an updated program or system in place that allows them to be able to not have to go look for here and wait for this and go for there and look at all these different places for a set of information that will be helpful not only for them, but also for East Lansing Police Department in a positive aspect. But I'll shut up real quick and let other commissioners weigh in if you have anything else to say on Deputy Chief Gonzalez's presentation.
If somebody gets killed, there's going to be a lawsuit, and it'll be damage awards could be in the millions of dollars. If you have something that's cost $3,000 a year that can save somebody's life and save a lawsuit, it's worth it.
Any other comments? Commissioner Root and Commissioner Haro, and we are at 8:05, just to kind of let everyone know where we're at on time. Please go ahead.
I felt really concerned about the pie charts showing the overrepresentation of African Americans in all the 3 categories. And I wanted to learn more about that. And one of the things I realized is I don't know about East Lansing what the age distribution is of people who are in these various categories, and what the geographic, where do these things happen? And I'm not expecting you to, explain all that to me right now, but what proportion of the people who are arrested live in East Lansing? What proportion don't? What proportion are young adults? And of course, we know that not all young adults are MSU students, but that is part of, a significant population who lives here. So just as we go along, I'd like to understand better who in the community is interacting with the police. Because those are people those are the interactions we're caring about. And it would just help me understand it a little bit better if I knew more about residents and age and location of these things. So that's just maybe an agenda item for later.
So Commissioner Root, just to address your answer, that's a great question. And we actually are doing some preliminary work on that also, reference doing some research. It may take some time, but it's those numbers are not necessarily disturbing, but actually you have a great point, reference people coming and going in our cities who may not even live here. And so it's going to take us some research and figure out how we can best do that and capture that data a little more closer to what we're doing out there. And so that's one of these things that we are, we were going to do that anyway from our department standpoint, not necessarily from this commission standpoint, but it's something that we're going to be moving forward to see how we can capture that. There's a lot of different research materials out there, a lot of different studies out there in the country that we're going to try and figure out what might be best for us to do some research to see who we're interacting with and the numbers and things like that.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Williams, please go ahead.
I have nothing.
Oh, I thought you did. I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. It was Commissioner Haro who raised his hand. I'm sorry about that.
I just had a question as to the extent of data collection. So other than, or reporting rather, other than the officer initiated traffic stops, I was just wondering how much data ELPD puts out. And then as a follow-up to that or related to that, what sort of analysis gets done of that data, right? So there's a difference between putting out sort of descriptive data and putting it on the website, and people can say, all right, we've made, a certain number of arrests this month for this type of crime versus, other types of crimes or trends over time. And that's different from doing an actual analysis of what those trends look like, why they may be trending, whether we're seeing geographic variations over time and things of that nature. So I guess my question is, to what extent ELPD does that sort of analysis rather than just reporting pure data?
I think actually Deputy Chief got knocked off there, so I'm gonna have to he got knocked off his Wi-Fi right now. So I'm gonna actually have to ask you to repeat that so I can I answer in Steve's absence here. My mistake.
Sure. No, my question was how much actual analysis of data gets done by ELPD versus just reporting numbers?
Great. That's a great question. Right now, well, for the last 3 weeks, I mean, from going back to history when I've been there before, we weren't breaking down, we weren't doing our analysis. We were doing it, we were gathering the data, we were looking at it, and we were, trying to keep an eye on it. We weren't doing a lot of digging. And I can't speak for the last 8 years, but when I retired in 12, we weren't doing that much analysis of it at all. So I can't speak for what's been happening the last 8 years though.
All right, thank you, Chief, for trying to handle that question. I know you're just getting aboard with some of the different things and getting caught up.
That's fine.
I just got some just real quick rapid fire questions. Now, for this accreditation process that the East Lansing Police will be doing, one, what is the timeline with that, and when will that actually be done? And when that is done, within that, does the accreditation process require you to have an early warning tracking system in play other than what you have now, or could you maintain with what you have now as for what you use? And then do you have a different mandate when it comes to the use of force policy once accreditation is in play? I wasn't quite sure about how that works.
Commissioner, that's a great question. The accreditation process is pretty much centered around our policies and procedures. And so we are required to update our policy procedures. They have to meet a certain guidelines and standards for us to be accredited. It's going to take us anywhere between 1 to 2 years to get accredited because we're going to have to look at all of our policy procedures, scrub them down, send them through the accreditation through the Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police, and they're going to have to review them and send back their recommendations as to what we need to clean up and things of that nature. We hopefully get it done within we're shooting for within a year to 2 years. But the first piece is getting our policy procedures up and running. And we have great policy procedures, but we just got to make sure they meet the standards of the accreditation process. And the part of the use of force and part of the tracking piece of keeping trends and what's going on is the early warning system. I believe some of that is part of the accreditation process because they have to come in and do an audit of our department every couple of years to see what's going on. They hit a certain different amount of policy and procedures they have to review, and use of force is probably always going to be one that's going to hit the audit. And for us to pass our audit every 2 years or 3 years, we're not sure what the recertification is. We're going to have to deal with those requirements under those audit requirements. And the use of force would be one of them.
Is the force continuum also kind of lumped in with that, and how it, or is that separate from your practice and policies that you have independent of that accreditation process? Do you know that off the top of your head?
That's a good question. Steve, would you know that?
I'm sorry, I got kicked off the internet.
We just talking about the use of force. Is the use of force reports, is that being tracked in the accreditation process through MACP?
Yes, there is a use of force standard in the MACP accreditation process. I can't speak to it right off the top of my head, but there is a tracking system in there, and I believe there might be an early warning system in there as well. But we'll have to take a look at the standards to verify that for you.
My final question is, I want to talk about just really disciplinary expungement. And this is my last question, I promise. I think the standard policy right now is 24 months where an officer is tracked with their behavior as far as discipline, what has happened and things like that. And there's a 24-month time frame that all of a sudden that history goes away. With the accreditation process, does that change? Or is that something that you control, or is that something that's a POAM deal when it comes to, because, our whole purpose is to get to a point where we have a commission who's able to be able to look at things. And sometimes, even though we don't really want to go in the past, we have to go in the past and understand certain things. Like, for example, where did this officer come from? Did this officer have a history of this with another department in the state of Michigan? These types of things, I think, will be important for the commission going forward, and understanding if this expungement of disciplinary action falls off or changes with accreditation is really, really important if you, in fact, have control of that within you know, the contract or your policies or accreditation? I just don't know. And that's my final question.
So I believe, I think in the officer's contract, they have the right to ask for discipline to be taken out of their personnel file after, I want to say it's after 2 years. The chief has the final say on that. They can make a decision as to whether or not that discipline comes out of their file or it doesn't come out of their file. You know, I think a lot of times the decision is going to be based on trends. So what other discipline does the officer have in their file? What is the severity of the discipline? You know, are we talking about a rude and unprofessional complaint against them that was sustained, or are we talking about something more severe, such as excessive force or things like that? So that may be something that we have to address through the POAM contract process, but it is something that is present for sure.
Thank you. And I know my questions sometimes, but I really appreciate you letting me know as much as you can. And these are very, very important things that I think I raised that really will not only help the community with transparency and trust, but also help protect our public safety officers who are out here doing the right thing when it comes to our community and going out here and doing their job, a tough job at that. I want to kind of conclude this in their time. Does any other commissioners have any follow-up questions that they cannot wait to ask at this moment in regards to the presentation?
I would just say that some of the questions are asked in chat as a matter of not, you know, going into further comment here. And we're already 8:16. So I think those questions need to be addressed that are in chat.
We'll definitely make that happen. And I think the appropriate way to bring that forward is having it in our old business for our next agenda for us to have that for discussion, I believe, unless I'm wrong about that, and that we can get that stuff answered for you. Or in fact, we may be able to kind of just give it sent out through Diane to the commission, which probably is the better way to do that as far as getting that information as soon as we can for future conversation. All right, thank you. We're going to move on to item 6.1. Thank you, Deputy Chief, and thank you, Chief Johnson, for your time on that presentation. 6.1, POAM demand to bargain impact of committee. And I know we talked about that just a little bit earlier, and I don't know, do you have any information in regards to their involvement? Yes, please, Shelley Newman.
Hi there. Yeah, this is Shelley Newman. So we did meet with POAM in June in response to their demand to bargain. So we fulfilled that. You know, during that meeting, it was our labor attorney, Deputy Chief Gonzalez, and myself, and their attorney had heard things that were happening in the city being discussed at City Council, and they had concerns that they were going to be implemented. And of course, a union has concerns whenever a term and condition of their employment is being discussed. So they just wanted to kind of talk about things, and we explained that this group would actually be first, and that this group would be recommending what the police review committee would be doing. So they kind of had some misunderstanding about where we were in the process. So we kind of caught them up on that. And that's the last we heard.
Any follow-up questions for Mrs. Shelley Newman? Just for outside of that, when is the, please go ahead, Commissioner Williams.
I was trying to unmute myself. Do you, as an experienced person in this area, do you have any idea of how likely it is that those changes that Mr. Grigsby mentioned would might be inserted in the union contracts?
Well, I think it's very kind of nuanced, and I think you would definitely benefit from hearing from a labor attorney regarding what information is actually shareable, like public safety officers' personnel records. There are some nuances there that are different. So that's definitely, is that what you're talking about?
No, that wasn't what I was talking about. I'm not worried about confidential information. I wouldn't presume to breach that. What I'm asking is if you trigger one of these performance indicators, there's a couple of provisions in the contract saying that after 2 days or 10 days or 2 years, it falls off the radar, and the police department, the employer, can't take any action based on that deviance. Is there any likelihood that in order to comply with the accreditation and in order to start up a formal early intervention system or early warning system, that we could remove those drop dead deadlines from the union contract, so that you could look back over an officer's entire career in order to evaluate their fitness as an officer?
I think that that is certainly subject to bargaining, and that's a conversation that we would have. It would be necessary to have at a bargaining table.
Thank you, Mrs. Newman. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Now, as far as the direct negotiation of the contract, just for clarity, the city manager is the only one that is able to weigh in on that, and I guess staff, but none of the council members have a say in how that contract is listed. They can only approve or deny it. Is that how you look at it?
So the process there is that we identify items that we are looking for in order to change the terms and conditions during a contract negotiation. We identify that. The city manager, staff, myself, we sit down and say, what are the problems with the current contract? We come up with parameters, and then we meet in confidential executive session with city council and get their input.
So can they make recommendations directly, or when you say input, is that what you're saying? They get to say, well, hey,
They give
we don't
us
like
feedback.
this.
Absolutely. They
Okay.
are part of that establishing of parameters through us. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you, Shelley Newman. I think we're going to move on if anyone doesn't have something very, very urgent that they have to ask right now. We really appreciate this information. I know a lot of us are walking away with a better, at least I am, I guess I should speak for myself, about a better understanding kind of really how the scope really is going to play itself out and whatnot when it comes to being able to advocate for this commission and their mandate going forward. So thank you so much. Moving on, if we're all done with that, we're going to move on to item 6.2, NACOLE and commission models. On this particular section, we can be very, very brief about that, but because we're not quite there yet. But we really, I think, and I'll just say this, I really think that we need to start thinking about how the model that we want to kind of really start maybe looking for as far as the data that we'll ask for now in order to be able to create this commission. There's a couple different versions in the NACOLE information. If you haven't had a chance to go through that, I would highly recommend that you do your homework, go in there and look at some of these basic things as a point of reference. That's not the Bible to everything that we're doing, but at the same time, they've been doing this all around the country. They have several different examples of ways to go about really doing a good job in what we are tasked to do going forward. And I'll just say that. Is there any other comments or input that we have on the NACOLE 6.2 item? Okay, please, if you have an opportunity, if you haven't done it already between this time and next meeting, please go in there if you don't have anything better right now. When you think about what model do I want to have this structured under in order for this commission to effectively do their job. It's a great point of reference. I really highly recommend that all commissioners go in there and at least just take a look at that so you know what to like or not like when it comes to your preference. And I already have mine, but I will save that for the sake of time for everyone's kind of really ready to have that conversation in future meetings. All right, so any other commission input or anything like that before we adjourn for the evening tonight? Yes, Commissioner Williams.
I had a suggestion of a person that I would like the committee to listen to. And it doesn't have anything to do with the accreditation or the early warning system or the union contract or anything. It has to do with this dispatch system. And I know a person who is affiliated with community mental health who knows a good deal about those dispatch systems where they have mobile mental health teams. And I would suggest that perhaps Mr. Lahanas can set up some kind of meeting and put him on the schedule. Ask him if he has time to speak to us. If the committee would like to, let's hear him.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. We'll definitely follow up on that. And that brings up to my final point of the schedule that was presented by Mr. Lahanas. We have going forward for November 9th, Black Lives Matter as a possible presentation. And I just wanted to get your general thoughts in regards to the overall. Do you feel that that's something that we can take advantage of right now for the next meeting? Do you have any thoughts in regards to possibly moving some things around that schedule? Please take a look at the schedule if you haven't already and kind of weigh in and send that in to us if you do have a point of preference about kind of really what you see and what you like to see. And Diane and I and Vice Chair Williams will have a discussion in regards to setting up the next agenda and get what's appropriate to what you guys are generally wanting to see next in the presentation based on our conversation today. Sound good? All right. If there's nothing more else, I would look for a motion for adjournment.
I'll second that.
I didn't see who first, who moved it. I think it was Commissioner Josephson, seconded by Vice Chair Williams. All those who approve adjournment, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you so much, everyone, for your time tonight. We look forward to getting some work done. Have a good evening. Take care.